Well, hello, one and all. How are you guys doing? Welcome back to the show. Unfortunately, today, Nico and Davina is tied up, but we have the living legend, the one and only Brian Deneve once again, which is really awesome when he's here.
Yeah, it's
Hi,
a pleasure
guys.
to join you.
Hey, Tony, what's up?
Not much, man. Just hanging in there. Had been up for a few hours and just I haven't had any coffee for like all week. I decided I'm just going to go like 1 week. I mean, not that there's a problem with drinking coffee. I just figured I'm just not going to do it for 1 week. And so today I have it, and boy, I tell you, it's a treat. It's great, because you kind of get used to doing something and you take it for granted and you become blasé about it. But now, yeah, this coffee's actually tasting very good today.
Tony, you drink black or you do cream sugar or what?
Black. And you know what's funny? When I was a kid, I would drink coffee with cream and sugar. Now, my grandmother, I'm probably, my low blood sugar probably came from her because she was hypoglycemic. She used to put, coffee in her sugar, basically. I mean, like 6 teaspoons or something. So anyhow, yeah, I used to do a lot of sugar when I was really young. And when my grandfather had the diabetes, I'm like, well, I better watch this. So I started to wean myself. Well, how I did it was I weaned myself off the cream in the coffee. Then I started drinking it just black with like 4 sugars. And then I made it 3 sugars, 2 sugars, 1 sugar, and then I made the plunge and went with no sugar. Probably by the time I was like 17 or 18. So basically my whole adult life, I've drank coffee black unless somebody has that creamer flavor stuff they want me to try, and some of that's very good. But
Tony,
yeah,
you're like the Gen Z kids that are starting coffee in like middle school now. I was 30 some years old. You were a teenager, huh? Drinking the stuff?
I was drinking the stuff before I was a teenager. See, every morning, I don't know, maybe it's an Italian thing, but every morning before I had to go to school, I would have a cup of my grandma would make a cup of coffee. So, I mean,
So
that
that
was
was
every day.
common? That was common among your peers or other Italians your age back in the 70s?
I didn't know any other Italians my age back in the 70s. I
Fair
didn't,
enough.
but I can tell you in my family, that's the way, that's the way my grandparents did it. So, yeah, I don't even remember talking to kids about it. I probably assumed that I guess I probably assumed everybody did it. You don't know as a kid. You just think, you live a very normal life until you get older and you realize, Jesus, what a dysfunctional situation I was in.
Yeah,
Right?
I rarely ask my middle school classmates about their breakfast. I understand where you're coming from.
Well, I do remember this one time, and I don't know why this sticks out in my head because I never would have known this about me. But I had a friend come over and my grandmother made dinner, and it was rare that I had anybody come over. And I remember looking at my grandfather because whoever my friend was drinking during the meal. And I was never allowed to do that. I wasn't allowed anything to drink until after I was
Wine?
done with the meal.
Probably wine we're talking.
No. My grandfather had
Oh,
no alcoholic
oh,
beverages.
drinking just a beverage
Yeah,
while he was
we
eating.
were kids. Yeah, no, just yeah. But my grandparents never allowed me to drink, soda or whatever, soda pop or whatever it was, until after I was done eating. Now, I would never have remembered that if it wasn't for this story, because this story sticks in my head. And then of course, as I got older, probably like a teenager, then I, abandoned all that. I would drink pop while I was eating probably, so. What about you guys? I mean, did you have any crazy different eating habits?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a friend that also, and I don't think it was mandated by the family, but I remember none of them drinking anything until like the meal was done.
Yeah,
And
like me.
I would wash it down the whole time. And I don't know, I even read articles that supposedly that's better for your digestion, and probably even from like an Italian standpoint, unless you're pairing with wine or something, it's better for like the food, savoring the food if you think about it, as
Mhm.
opposed to introducing other flavors via your beverage. I don't know, just some thoughts, but and I'm obviously part of my family's Korean, so that's a whole other thing we could talk about and how they
Well,
eat.
let me ask you this. Did you eat with chopsticks? Serious question.
Sometimes if it was Korean food, I would, yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't eating like hamburgers with chopsticks, but yeah.
Wow. Well, what about you, Joe? I mean, first of all, did you eat? Did your family feed you? Or, I mean,
I mean, we mostly foraged in the woods,
okay.
on weekends and whatever we could, whatever kill we could find. So,
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, why do I ask these questions with you? Why?
but you're talking about starting coffee young. I had a buddy, he's Puerto Rican, and his parents or his mother mostly would flavor his baby bottle, so the milk, with coffee. So he literally started. I mean, he got on the juice early, basically. He was, they had him strung out pretty early on the coffee. But he has always had high cholesterol. And, I think his mom actually passed away partially due to some cardiac issues. So it's been something he's been trying to really get a handle on. It's gonna interesting to hear his kind of journey fighting it. Clearly, there's some genetic predisposition for him, um, but he's done everything. He's been a marathoner, done all kinds of different exercises and dietary changes to try and it's interesting because like he'll when he initially started running, he had a huge improvement in his cholesterol, but then it's like his body adapted, and even though he didn't change his mileage, um, the numbers shot back up again. So his latest thing is he actually found some articles that were saying that there might be a link with coffee and cholesterol. I don't know how peer reviewed or what the quality of the study is, but that's a new thing he's trying, basically, because it's something he's had his whole life, literally, since he was a baby, some form of coffee. Um, you know, so it's interesting. But in general, I'll say this, yeah, like I always, as a kid, coffee was something they always served the adults at church. I stayed away from it. I love the smell of it, but I fear caffeine. I used to get strung out on just the caffeine and pop. Like when I was working at Children's, they switched from like the vending machine that had cans of pop to like the bigger plastic bottles, so I was upping my dosage. And there was one day where like I was late for lunch or whatever, some problem happened at work. And so it was like, I don't know, 1:32. And man, I got like the biggest withdrawal, like migraine. Like this is after having, a few weeks of the other stuff. And I didn't put two and two together for a while, but like over the course of a couple of years, I realized, oh man, this is really messing me up. I mean, I love caffeine. I function really well on it. Like if I'd have a pop in the morning at work, I was knocking stuff out. I was focused on stuff I didn't want to work on. So, I mean, I'd be great for like uppers or something. I'd be really productive, but the come down, oh my God. Yeah. Like I have learned to fear it, like worse than like a hangover, honestly. It lays me out. Like it's just like, I assume it's a migraine because it's like head pain coupled with nausea to the point where like, I want to die. It's just like put me out of my
Yeah.
misery. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
I fear it. And like so I fear it even like I know pop has a lot less caffeine than coffee. So I'll never take that step, because I've heard there's good benefits from coffee too, like stroke prevention, possibly. I don't know. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting. My friend, like I said, he just started this a few weeks ago. And so he's going to get his cholesterol tested. Um, to see if there's been an impact. But again, there's so many variables, it's really hard to pin down what's causing it.
Sure. I'm curious too, just not a nutritionist or a physician, it is a caffeine can be a potent drug, and if you're introducing that to a developmental situation, whether it's a baby or a younger child, are there any kind of long term? I have no idea. I would like to get your take, Tony, because caffeine is touted, especially by weightlifters or people doing, I would say certain fitness advocates as something to introduce prior to your workout or even during your workout to help enhance it. I don't know if you ever experienced that or any thoughts.
So the old time weightlifters, what they would like to do is drink 3, 4, 5 cans of, Coca-Cola and take some aspirin to get that buzz energy before their workout. And then after the workout, they many times ate large pizzas and drank beer. Okay, to get that, keep that size, and because we're talking Olympic style lifting here. I believe Norbert Szymanski was one of those guys that did that for what I just mentioned.
Which era was him? I'm not familiar with the name.
The late 40s and 50s, early 50s. He was an Olympic champion and everything. He passed away by now, but yeah, he was a heavyweight, but not like 400, 300 pounder. But yeah, a lot of those guys did that in the gym to get that, because that that'll get you like this all keyed up, and then you have that energy. When I was lifting heavy with Kevin, I was always taking protein powder, and then for a while, 20 some years ago, we were doing the creatine, and then we kind of really, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say the creatine helped or didn't help. It may have helped, but then once we quit doing the creatine, we didn't lose anything.
Mhm.
But Kevin was the type of guy that would drink coffee all day long. Okay, he would not stop. I mean, just all day long. Pots, like 2 to 3 pots of coffee. Sometimes there was a little Bailey's in his coffee as well. But
Or some Crown. I think some Crown he would throw, but the Crown was in the coffee cup. I don't think it was actually in the coffee, just in a coffee cup. So.
yeah, he used to shove us on the rocks was his scotch, and
Right.
but for me, it's never, even today, the worst, I had a limit to how much coffee I would be able to drink. And normally 2 cups I can handle. The third cups on some days could be dangerous, because then I'm starting to get real edgy. I get really nervous. I get almost like a panic attack. So, yeah, that's the caffeine. So it's rare that I'll have 3 cups of coffee. So for me, I didn't use any stimulants like that. I just kind of did it. But
Yeah, I imagine there's some diminishing returns. I mean, if you drink a cup of coffee before your workout, you're great. But maybe if you're drinking 3 or 4, you don't sleep very well that night and you're not recovering from the workout. So there's probably, everyone's different, obviously. There's like an anti-coffee, no one call anti-coffee, but there's a lot of people on YouTube that say don't drink coffee because it is, because of its neuro qualities and things, that it's kind of an unnatural thing that can be problematic. I don't know. Depends on who you talk to.
I think Sylvester Stallone advocated drinking coffee. Kevin had a book that Stallone wrote on, weightlifting or training, bodybuilding, whatever you want to call it. And I remember I didn't read the book. Matter of fact, I think Kevin may have given it to me. I probably had that book.
That's pretty cool. I didn't even know Stallone wrote a book on that.
Yeah. I should look upstairs for it. Anyhow, I remember Kevin coming to the gym. Yeah, boy, slides just like me, boy. Drink coffee all day long. I'm like, okay, so yeah. Again, that's what Kevin said. I didn't read the book. I remember seeing the book. And we're talking probably 10, 15 years ago. Because shoot, you know what? Kevin's going to be dead now 4 years. Hey, let me just interject this quickly before we go further, and then we'll get back to this. So I found out Thursday that or Friday that I lost a very nice guy, Big Tim Robeson, just out of the blue, and apparently he died the 13th. And I don't know how he passed away. I don't want to make an assumption, but I think it was just a quick thing. And he used to be a power lifter as well. He was a very large man, very big, but his heart was even bigger. He was just really a wonderful, wonderful man. And it's sad that he's gone. It just, I mean, as big as he was just a gentle guy. He would always be there to help you. And he was really trying to get his nephew to hook up with me, who was an NCAA champion wrestler, to train. And, especially when we were doing those seminars, and, then the seminar stopped, and then the COVID, and now this, so I probably never even run into his nephew, but, yeah, I just wanted to make a shout out to all those people that he touched, because he touched plenty of people. But getting back to the coffee thing, yeah, or people, don't drink coffee or drink coffee or don't eat this or eat this. I don't know. I think my key to life is just moderation on everything. I mean, unless you have some physical, reaction to certain things, just take things in moderation, because you can read stuff until your head spins on how, I mean, you get these people who live to be in their hundreds, and some of them said they smoked and drank their whole life. Not like alcoholics, but they'd have alcohol, they smoke a cigar or a cigarette or something, and then you have others who were total teetotalers in life, and they don't live to be long. They don't live long, so it's
Yeah.
a crapshoot, right? I think it's genetics mainly.
I know a couple teetotalers, I think is the right
Yeah.
word.
Mhm.
These people could use a drink. Let's just put it that way. One of
Yeah.
them's, yeah. I mean, they're, and everyone's different and have their own reasons for it, and I think I can respect that. Actually, I'll touch on the creatine thing. I remember back in the day. Well, back in the day, that was. I think it's kind of just been accepted, but that was somewhat controversial with some circles, saying that it was unhealthy and led to other issues, injuries and issues with dehydration. But I remember specifically the way you and Kevin would do it with your lifting is it was basically kind of that extra edge when you're maybe trying to max out on a certain thing. So if you were just normally doing through your progression, you're getting to a heavy max or a power, a big PR, you would try to align the final several weeks, for example, with your, creatine load to kind of push you over to that edge, particularly, so to speak. It wasn't like, at least during this particular time in the tool and die shop, there may have been other times you did more like regularly, but I remember that specifically, like, yeah, we'll just stick with the protein and maybe some of these other supplements. You guys didn't go too crazy on it, but then we'll start hitting the creatine and it'll kind of push us over to, we're talking 400 pounds. It was like some serious numbers you guys were talking about at the time. So,
Well, yeah, and the other thing that we did take, now this is really not, well, it's a supplement, I guess, but Kevin swore by glucosamine with chondroitin. Now, I had a lot of joint pain from, all the boxing and wrestling stuff, martial arts, whatever you want to call it. That never worked for me, okay, ever. And as a matter of fact, earlier this year, or maybe I started in December, I just happened to be at the store and I saw more glucosamine, and I tried it. I tried it for 2 months every morning with absolutely no effect. But for Kevin, he swore that it helped him. So that was something that for a while he took. And then we used to drink this drink called Metaform Heat, which was the most horrible tasting stuff. Now, this is back in 1997 through 1998. That I remember because of the girl that I was dating, because her one kid, her son, I had him try it. Oh my God. But that was short-lived as well. And the reason we got off of creatine was no other reason than we ran out, and we used to go to our buddy Little Big Jeff, used to have a place, and we never ordered online or did anything like that. We'd always would drive to his store to get everything, okay, protein, everything, because the guy's just an awesome guy, Jeff Gruskovic, and we used to call him Little Big Jeff, because we had a guy named, we had Kevin's brother Jeff, who was just plain old Jeff. Then we had Big Jeff, and then we had Little Big Jeff. Okay, so we had to try to distinguish. So
there was no big little Jeff in there.
Huh?
There was no big little Jeff in there.
Hey man, we don't know everybody. There's
Maybe
time.
nothing added to the roster. It makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Proceed. Go ahead.
Well, so we just ran out of creatine, and we were just you know, tied up, and we couldn't spare the time, because when we went to go see Little Big Jeff, it wasn't just going to his store. We're going to hang out with him and talk and catch up and all of this. So we noticed, well, we're lifting pretty good. We're not like struggling here. We're not like sliding backwards. Um, Maybe for us, we just don't need it anymore. And the less stuff, in my opinion, that you put into yourself, the better. Um, so yeah, and then Kevin is like, yeah, what the hell? We don't need it. Let's just. But we did stick with the protein. Uh, we did have to eventually make a run when we ran out of protein. That's something you want, because especially with my diet, um, I didn't get a lot of protein because I'm a single guy. I was single back then. I don't make all this high protein food, so I would drink the protein. Uh, but yeah, I miss those days in a way. I miss Kevin, so they're interlocked. There's no way I can think about those times and separate myself from him. We were like Siamese twins with everything. Um, but his body was, reacted completely differently than mine. And I remember the sticking points that he went through, and how he started a backslide, and we had to correct that. And then I remember my sticking points and the backslide. It's just, but it was totally different because physiologically,
Sure.
we were different people, just like you and I. I mean, but I was never the problem with me is I had these ideas of what I wanted, strength levels, strength plateaus, and or goals. And my problem is my body is good for fighting because I got long arms and I have a narrow chest. I my size in my chest was all my packs. Kevin had that, bigger, like a rib cage, and his arms were shorter. So Kevin was actually better built for the bench press or things like that. Whereas it was very difficult for me because, like I said, I'm moving that bar plenty. Uh, so I always, and I just wanted to have a good bench. I wanted to have a good overhead press. And that too was, I was at a disadvantage because, I had a long arm. But it helped me with my deadlift. Uh, and obviously it must have worked for the curls because that's what I was the best at, my curls. So, but Kevin, boy, he could curl too. Uh, it was amazing how much he could curl, and that would blow people's minds. A guy his age, curling what he was curling.
Yeah, I remember. I'll tell you a quick Kevin story. You might like it. Is so we were talking supplements one day, and I would read like Muscle and Fitness, or I forgot. This was the '90s, so kind of internet was still in its formative stages. So the racks would be full of your fitness info. Primarily came from these publications, and there was one, might have been an article, it may even been more of like a press release kind of promotional piece about, it's called Tribulus terrastis or terrastesis or something. It was a product that was being sold. And one kind of ancillary benefit allegedly was that it, increases your sex drive, because it was basically like enhanced your testosterone, or maybe it's partial testosterone as a product. And I'm like, well, you guys take this, you and Tony, because I saw it on the shelf that had all the layout, the bench where you had all your supplements at Tool and Die Shop. I'm like, and I said, does that stuff make you horny? He goes, shit, Brian, I'm horny all the time anyway.
That's Kevin. That's Kevin. I don't remember us taking that. That might have been the Little Big Jeff was our guy. Okay. This guy knew everything. As a matter of fact, he ended up winning like Masters, Illinois, bodybuilding. And I trained him a little bit too in the hooking. But we would run everything past him. And he was a wealth of knowledge. I mean, to this day, I don't know anybody that knows more than him. He ended up selling his store. I've lost touch with him because he sold his store, and he ended up working for well, I don't want to say the name because I could be wrong. I don't know if it was Optimum Nutrition or forget it. I don't remember now who, but I got to try to track him down. I haven't talked to him since, before Kevin got killed. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff is just marketing, and you know, but Kevin was so unique because we did everything against the textbook. Okay, like you saw it. He'd be smoking a cigar and hitting a heavy bag, and he'd be drinking his Chivas while he's benching. Just these are things that proved something, though. It proved one thing. And Kevin used to always say this to everybody who would ask him about lifting, about benching, because he was the Illinois and Missouri state champ, and he's like, "You want to get better at the bench? I'll tell you what you do, bench." And that was basically his outlook. Very simplistic approach. I mean, of course, he did all the assistance work for the triceps and his lats and what have you, but as far as making all these crazy cocktails of different things, I'm not going to sit here and bash the industry because I'm sure that this stuff has helped a lot of people. But for us, for me especially, just I need protein. Protein is all for the last 20 years of my life, or 15, 18 years of lifting. That's all I would take, would be supplement with just protein and nothing else. And if I'm really in pain,
I could jump in. Yeah, the assistance, if I could jump in, the assistance work to add to that was a huge thing for me. I mean, if anyone didn't hear my previous story with you, is I came in the tool and die shop. This was in the 90s. I was weighing like 150 pounds. I don't think I could even bench press that at the time, but within a year I was able to put more than 100 pounds on my bench, which granted is starting from semi-zero. I was still lifting, but just didn't know how. And then obviously put on a decent amount of size and strength. But that was a big thing, was really the bench is a compound lift. It's a very large lift, but there are smaller muscles involved. And you need to target those smaller muscles. For example, the triceps is so much of a huge factor in the bench press and getting those numbers up. And some of the other things that, we were doing, partials and lockouts, I think are a phenomenal way to get your body used to heavy weights. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, that's basically you get under a bar, you pretty much put double or at least 100 pounds over your max weight. And then you're not taking the bar off the rack. You're just sliding it up to a position for like a 30-second count. And then that gets your body acclimated to, this is heavy weight that I'm maintaining. And then obviously incorporate that as on occasion. But I remember lockouts, you don't want to do too much because it's really hard on the joints, right? It's kind of an occasional thing to work in.
Hurts your bones, man. It's really painful. You don't do that often, but Chuck Sipes was a big guy on the lockouts, and I'm sure a lot of the old timers did that. Then we were doing like triples and things like that. I remember reading in a USA Powerlifting magazine or something, when Anthony Clark was like the big name in bench press, and he passed away at a young age, but he was short and really big. Like I think he was like 360 pounds and whatever. Anyhow, they did like a diagnosis of how far he moved the bar basically, and it wasn't that far, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it might have been like 18 inches of travel on that bench press for him. So I remember we had that power rack, and one day I said, "Come on, Kevin, we're going to load some weight up on here. We're going to get it." So now this isn't a fair comparison, but whatever the distance was, I think it was 18 inches. I wanted to make sure that's all I wanted to move the bar was 18 inches or whatever it was. And I was astounded at how much I was able to. I ended up moving 700 pounds. And I said, I better stop because I thought I might have hurt myself at that point. But it's a lot of it is mechanics. And when you first came to the gym, you would bench and then you would flare out like this, like a lot of people do. They'll flare out. So you had to work on your shoulders. That was one of your weak spots. And so you got to have like a critical analysis. So bench press, like anything, it's more than just strength. I mean, obviously you have to have that, but there's technique to it. Perhaps subtle technique as opposed to like explosiveness, like in the Olympic lifts or something. But so yeah, we ironed that out, and then it was just a question of getting you, and you're like me, long arms, thin chest, you're never going to bench a lot of weight. You just can't do it. And that's what I learned, when I went to that rack, and I'm thinking, Jesus. So but that was a very good experiment for me, because I knew, okay, I have the finishing strength. I'm lacking down here. I'm lacking getting it off of my chest. So in essence, that really paid off for me. So I had to start working more to get my low end bench, getting it off. Now, we can really get technical with this. There's guys that use chains on the bars, or bands. So the further up you go, the more resistance you start to get. So imagine chains being on the ground across the bar. Now they're on the ground. So in essence, let's say you have no weight at all on the bar. You just have the bar itself, 45 pounds. So then as you're lifting, the further you go, now the chains are coming off the ground. So when you're totally locked out, the chains are now fully off the ground. So whatever those chains weigh, that's added weight. So it's kind of like a range of motion thing. Now I've never done that. I believe Big Brian Klaus did that. I never did that, because I was never going to be a competitive bench presser. I just had my own personal goals here, but there's just so many different ways of training. Louis Simmons out of Columbus, he had a big successful bench press team, I guess you'd say. He was putting out, I mean, I've lost touch with that world, but he was putting out a bunch of guys 700-pound bench pressers. I mean, that's a lot of weight. I mean, but yeah, you did awesome. Kevin was training this other guy too, this kid, and he made terrific gains. As a matter of fact, he was like you. He was benching like 140, 150, and eventually Kevin got him to pop 300. And that's all the kid wanted. He just wanted to bench 300. That was his big thing. Kevin got him there. And that's just nice, those little success stories.
Yeah, and it's universal. I mean, one time we've had this conversation before of like, when it comes to even combat sports of, I tapped this guy out, this happened, even with knockouts, but a 300-pound bench press is universal. You could mention that, you could say that, maybe you do the conversion to kilos for Europe or Russia, but like that's a quantitative metric for a specific ability of the human body, which is strength in this particular plane. So yeah, it's, like I said, it's universal. It's a big deal. One thing that Kevin did that I think is interesting, and I'd heard this as maybe some of the Soviet bloc, obviously you did all kinds of things, but he would sometimes, because I would maybe have the day off of work and I would come in and work out with him, and he would kind of lift throughout the day. Like, because he was obviously owned this business. He was a craftsman. He had a tool and die shop. So he was do work, break away, hit some reps, or maybe just bench, go back to his desk, get back to work, and do everything else. And then I'm maybe doing more, and he'll come back and join me a little bit later, and maybe hit. So it was basically like some days he was lifting like throughout the day rather than a concentrated hour or 2 hour session. I do remember that also being, part of just his lifestyle, or just, how he balanced it with his career. Very effective, obviously, at least for him.
Yeah, and again, that's the thing. It was totally non-traditional. And look, there's no way to prove, because this is you can't prove something like this, that if he would have stuck to a strict textbook routine, we'll never know if he would have benched more, or it may be less. We don't know. What we do know is that it worked for him, and frankly, there was a period of time near the end of his life where he didn't get to really work out. Okay, I mean, it was just baby shit stuff, right, now and then. But he maintained his size, he maintained his weight, and his bench was down maybe 20, 25 pounds. And we're talking a guy who's 70 years old and is still putting up over 300 pounds, and without a bench shirt, drug free, and his body weight was like, high 180s, maybe 190, depending, and just goofing around with it by that stage of his life. And that's the ironic part. We were going to train him once he turned 70. He was going to go for the world record in his age group. And unfortunately, the plane crash, that's that. But that's all he wanted to do was, and I cannot tell you how many times he smashed the world record in the gym. Just it was, I mean, it was unbelievable, and just a nice guy. Uh, and he did it, like you said, casually. I was a little bit more, well, I didn't have the tool and die shop. I mean, I had to drive there, but I was a little more not casual, regimented. I mean, I had my time allotted. I wanted to get in there and get the workout going. And then when we moved to Bensonville and had the gym, same thing. He worked downstairs. He could come up, and there were times where I'd show up to work out with him, and he's like, I can't. He says, I'm too tied up. I got to get this order out. So I'd have to lift by myself, which is fine, but but he made it work for him, man. He just did. Never quite saw anybody like him. I don't think I ever will. I mean, I can't. I'd have to start from the age of 0 and live to 100 to try to find another guy like Kevin. He was. I don't know if they make him like him anymore.
It's kind of cool that he had the weights at his place of work too. I think or if you have the weights at home, I think that probably goes a long way to keeping you consistent. When you have easy access to it, I think that can go a long way, whether it's like having a heavy bag up or somewhere where you don't have to make that extra effort, or take the extra time. Like if it takes me an extra 20 minutes to get to and from the gym, well, that's just, it makes it that much less likely, that I'm going to be able to do it as routinely. More things can get in the way. So I think it's good that, I guess, that he arranged his life, around that, that he was like always 30 seconds away. If he had just, a short amount of time to be able to get his workout in, at the end of the day at work or whatever, during lunch, that was a nice setup that he had.
Well, it grew over time. Once we moved to Bensonville, then I was able to buy all this different equipment, or we'd find it here or there, Craigslist or eBay. And, it was little by little. And, he had the access to, he had a fork truck. So we were able to get the forklift, bring everything up onto the roof, bring it in and assemble some of those machines and everything. And yeah, we had a very nice, we had everything you could want. So there was no excuse equipment wise. We had it all. And, but he had that desire. When I first met him, that's right after I came out of the hospital in 94 is when I met him. And, he was a weightlifter already, but he didn't really know much. Even his technique on the bench, I remember he never even touched the chest with the bar. He stopped short of it. I'm like, wait, we got to work on this, bud. But I think part of that is why he developed such great triceps, because he had nice triceps, no biceps really, but his triceps were large, right? And I think it was because of all those years of him just not going all the way down and always keeping his triceps under tension. But then once we worked that out, then he started to go up and up and up. And like I say, I knew him. We started working out together in 94. And then I got the poster right here. I think it's 97 is when he won the Illinois and Missouri State Bench Press Championship. He was 51. And that's what he wanted to do. He said, I want to be a champion bench presser when I'm 50. I said, I'll get you there. Just work out, work hard. And he did. And he gets all the credit because he helped me and I helped him. It's like a mutual thing. And I was his spotter at both events, which was awesome. And they jobbed him on the, I don't want to get into it because I'd have to drop names and I don't want to do that. But somebody who was pretty notorious in the local powerlifting circles over here red lighted him on his first 2 attempts at the Illinois championships. And he did nothing wrong. He paused, then he pressed. They were legit lifts. And he got red lighted. It came down to his 3rd lift because he was going to go for the world record right there. I mean, he had the strength in him. So I'm like, well, you can't now. You know, you definitely, if you put on world record poundages, they're going to red light you. Okay. And because you're a nobody, you know, they don't know who we are. We're just coming in here and he, so I think he just ended up, I have it right over in the room. I could look, but I think it was 308 that ended up on the bar and, something like that. And boom, they green lighted him and he won the state title, which was great. So, boy, those are harrowing times, right? I remember that vividly. We had two people there with us. Big Jeff was one of them that was there, and the girl that I was seeing at the time was there. And yeah, we would have been. It should have just been Kevin and I. That's the way it should have been, and you know, no spectators. But yep. And then Kevin's like, the first thing he said when he was done, "Boy, Duber, I'm so glad that's over. Let's go get a drink," because you know he wanted to celebrate this. He made his goal. I think that's even more important when people have a goal and they make that goal. It could be a double-edged sword because now what? Sometimes it could be a letdown. You know, like, well, I've conquered the mountain. Now what? So Kevin just kept with the goals. He was always very goal oriented, you know, which was great. And you know, and now I look at him. I look back and I think, my God, I'm a lot older now than he was then. And I still keep thinking, well, he was an old man when he set that bench press record, or you know, won his title, first title. And now I'm thinking, oh, he was very young, all right? Because I'm a lot older now, like 5 years older than he was. That's what's strange.
Yeah, time can be a tricky thing just from perception. You know, I mean, you were 10 years younger than me, Tony, when I first met you. Less than that, actually, more than that. So, you know, back in 1990 X, I'll throw that in there.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Then I'll date myself here, you know.
yeah, right. Well,
But that's life.
here's what's funny. I believe Joe is probably the age that Kevin was when I first met Kevin. And everybody called him the old man. You know, oh, there's this old man that comes in here and he blah blah blah, and oh, hey, old man, old man, old man. That's even I would say that. I got Kevin, yeah, I mean, he's an old man, but boy, he's awesome. I think he's Joe's age when I first met him. That's what's perception. It's all about perception. It really is. But the thing
Sure.
about Kevin, the old man, he never, I mean, he never became the older man. You know, he was always like frozen in time. You know, he looked the same, he acted the same all throughout his life. He like hit that point of his life, and then it's just like never changed.
He's like the
That's
Bob Uecker of Chicago area fitness. I don't know. He was Bob Uecker. I swear has looked the same for like 30 years, but yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, oh boy, but you know, the thing with the moral, I guess, of all of this story is for people is don't always get so caught up in supplemental help or aids or whatever it is that you just, you know, put in the hard work. I mean, unless you're really, really, really going for a world record at the elitist, you know, the elite level there is, um, there's no shortcuts to just hard work, you know. And I think sometimes that's not everybody, but there are people out there that are looking for a shortcut. And I think those are the people who are going down the wrong track. Okay, because you're not going to get that strength without putting in the effort, man. It doesn't come out of a bottle, man. It comes out of here and out of here.
So, Brian, you had mentioned a fight you wanted to talk about.
Sure. So today is Sunday, April 18th, and last night there was an event. It was I don't call it a cultural event, but something that had a lot of mainstream appeal, which was the Triller Fight Club's matchup of Ben Askren and Jake Paul. Ben Askren, of course, being an MMA champion and a phenomenal wrestler. You know, probably definitely a pioneer in our modern era. And then, of course, Jake Paul, an internet personality. I believe it was a minute 59 knockout of Paul over Askren, TKO. Saw some clips online. I didn't watch the whole fight. I didn't watch, admittedly, as much of the different training footage that was leaked, or presented out there. But I just thought it was an interesting to touch upon because we obviously, both the guys walked away with at least $500,000. I think Askren in his post-fight press conference said $1 million. So there's probably other types of, supplemental revenue streams in the fight game that he's able to leverage or receive. And it was interesting. Just wanted to throw that out there.
I watched some of the clips too. They look like is it just a boxing match or was it MMA?
Oh yeah, it was a professional boxing match. It was a sanctioned professional boxing match. Yeah.
Okay.
Only
Yeah,
boxing.
I mean, that's kind of a weird choice for Askren. Well, I guess it's not a weird choice when you can get $1 million. I guess I would do it too. But just, for someone whose primary strength is grappling, and maybe he just felt that I don't know any of the context to this. I don't know if there's just some online beef between the two of them, or just kind of some fake hype to kind of get the promotion going. But it's definitely clearly, I think the outcome showed that, if you're the world's greatest grappler, if you're putting yourself in a boxing context, that is completely a different thing, and it seemed to show itself. And he's been even in MMA because he had that other fight where he I think he was like the fastest UFC knockout. I can't remember who he fought.
He received the fastest UFC knockout, or one of them.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. And the guy, it was. I mean, it's kind of a sobering reminder to grapplers. Someone at Askren's level. It doesn't mean you have all the pieces of the puzzle, But I mean, the guy ran at him and he changed levels. But he like, I can picture in my head, and he kind of opened his hands up, and the guy just did a jumping knee right at his head, and it was over. So, his instinct, his grappling instinct, really betrayed him there. And the fact that you've got to forget that's only one piece of the puzzle, in the big picture. And I think that's something obviously Tony's been preaching since day one, for decades now, that don't lose sight of the larger context of things. So, and I'm sure Tony, you have thoughts on that.
Well, first, let me preface this by saying I didn't know anything about this fight. I don't even know who these people are. Okay. To be frank with you, I never heard of either one of them. All right. And it wasn't until this morning that Brian brought it up, and he said the knockout is on the internet. So I just saw the wild right hand, the haymaker, and then the jab haymaker knockout. Okay, that's it. So I saw the clip. The whole clip was 32 seconds that I saw, but the action was like maybe 10 seconds of it, but it's enough for me to make. I don't need a bigger analysis. I saw enough. Okay, so this is absolutely nothing personal against these guys because I don't know them. Okay, honestly, I don't. So, couple of things that I've always said. In a street fight, forget the hype. This 90% of all fights end up on the ground. Throw all of that out the window, okay? Because still, the bulk of human beings are going to throw a punch in a street fight. And they're going to throw one similar to what that Jake Paul did, like a looping overhand haymaker, right hand. If they're, traditional, if they're right-handed. You have to prepare for this. And the sad thing is, he didn't throw just one. It wasn't like a lucky punch. He threw two. Okay, he threw one, and then a left, and then another one. Exact same kind of thing. Two things. Askren, I think, okay, so he broke the cardinal rule of everything that I coach. And we were actually filming something about this when you guys were over the house yesterday, about head movement. He was there like a robot, moving in and out, just like stiff. No good. The footwork was poor, and just literally no head movement. Okay. You've got to have head movement. You've got to just never let that guy know exactly where you're at, and you've got to learn to keep your hands up. I mean, like up, not down here, unless you're out of range. You want to keep your hands up so you can protect yourself. And if you're going to do any kind of closing move, like closing in, for sure keep them up. Don't. That's the worst time to start dropping stuff. Okay. And if you're going to throw that hook, you want to bury your face in your forearm if you can, so to speak. So you're just not allowing an opening. I mean, unless you're hooking to the body, and you can cover up, and so that's what I took away from that. Just you're there. He's right there. He's a sitting duck, so to speak, because no angles. He was pretty much right in front of the guy, and he didn't circle away from the guy's power hand. Okay, so when you see your haymaker coming, now let's not talk about Jake Paul. Now let's get him out of the equation. Just anybody who's going to be throwing or leading with a right hand, that's their power hand in this instance. Okay, because he has an orthodox stance. Already, okay, I got to circle away from that because that's, generally you don't lead with it, unless whatever, you're wide open. And that just wasn't done. Okay. He just came straight like this, like I said, straight in and boom. So, yeah, it's kind of shocking that an MMA guy, champion on top of it all, would have that happen to a guy. Forgive me if I'm wrong here, but to a guy who's not a boxer, who just, I'm assuming this Jake Paul is not a boxer, who just kind of took it up for this fight. Am I incorrect there?
I mean, it's a semi-recent endeavor. This is his third fight in a professional boxing context. Or
Okay.
his other two opponents, I don't think were professional boxers. I think one was a former NBA player. So there is a certain amount of like curiosity element to these matchups. That's but like I said, he's been legitimately training with different in camps, and
Okay.
I haven't been privy to all the clips, but yeah, and obviously a very good athlete. He's been applying himself as well as Askren is too, world class in that endeavor. Question, I guess, related to that, if so, you're speaking really well on proactive measures and the fight overall. Is there a specific defense that you suggest in countering or avoiding that overhand or that haymaker kind of right variation that gets thrown?
Right. So there's several different kind of approaches. Normally with haymakers, like those, okay. What the problem? Okay, let's look at the pros of that. Okay, it's a wind-up punch. It's going to probably have a lot of force. If it lands. The negatives, though, is you're going to do one of these numbers, and your face is going to be, you're going to be totally vulnerable. Okay. Um, Overhand rights are a little bit different, where you're coming over the top. It's hard for me to do this sitting in a chair, but there's a difference between that and, like a windmill kind of strike. And if I reviewed the video again and he didn't throw the windmill type of strike, then I apologize, but let's stay on that windmill type of strike anyhow. So obviously, number one, you don't want to get hit by that. You got two approaches: step back, which is generally the easiest thing to do, but or change your level or spin or step away from it. But for me, it's kind of seeing it coming, try to slip to the outside of that punch. So you have this guy wide open and you throw a good left hook. And that should drop the guy if you know how to throw a good hook. So there are variations. And again, sometimes it's just a matter of blocking. If you just extend your arm out, on an angle to try to intercept it, you can do that if you want. But what you don't want to do is just what happened here. Just be a sitting duck. You have to move. You have to give that angle to the guy. So it's going to be an insignificant punch.
So to speak about the application, it sounds as if generally with a haymaker, or at least even in the case of this fight, the opponent's really committing and coming in, right? And so that actually creates a smaller range of distance that you can execute something like a hook, because you're already they'll already be there. He's meeting you almost halfway. Is that right?
Now, I'm not suggesting that happened in this fight because I have to watch it again. But yeah, sometimes they'll lean forward, they'll lurch forward. Other times they're just going to throw, that hand, and they're going to be wide open. You let it pass, whichever way you want to do it. If if you take just like a slight, I don't want to say lean back, but just like a kind of little step with your feet, not just bending backwards, but like a step back or step to the outside, then you have that wide open counter. It's there. You can catch the punch, okay? You catch it with your rear hand, that right hand coming in, okay? You catch it and counter. Or you do a stop hit with your jab. You try to catch him in the bicep when you see that coming to jam the punch. Those are all variations of some of the things that you can do. It's hard to sit here and say you do one thing because you kind of have to assess the attacker's stance and his ability. Whatever you decide to do, don't drop your right hand too. You don't learn to do everything. Like I said, if you catch a punch, your right hand is up here, so you're doing like the windshield wiper thing. So you can easily block his left hand if it's coming. But footwork is so important. That's your mechanism of transportation. Your feet can get you in and out of trouble. And don't stay in the pocket, man. Get out of there. Get out of that zone where you can get hit. And unfortunately, in this fight, he was right there. He was right in the zone where he could have gotten clobbered by that punch. That's the problem. If he would have just moved over, even just to like his right, okay, he'd have been okay. That punch would have went harmlessly by. But again, this is all part of. We saw a video yesterday where a guy was showing head movement. He looked like he was a kickboxer type, a Thai boxer perhaps, American guy, I think, or maybe you said he was Canadian. It doesn't matter, but he was showing head movement, did a really good job, but he didn't have the footwork tied into it. And he also showed head movement strictly. He was talking about it as a defensive or reflexive action, where head movements should also be proactive. You want to be able to move around, not letting that guy get the opponent set. That opponent will set when he knows where you're at. And in this case, the guy that got knocked out was coming right at him, and boom, he just set it up, man. Off of a jab. Very good job. I got to give the guy credit. He did it right. Jab and then the right hand. Textbook. But
And yeah, maybe let's talk more on that when it comes to offensive head movement. I don't think people should hide behind the excuse of trying to conserve energy and not moving, right? I mean, like that is an essential part of an offensive technique, is being proper head movement. And somebody who's maybe not in great shape will probably not try to move as much because it does expend a certain amount of energy. Right, Tony?
anything you do is going to expend energy. But we're talking about minuscule movements here. We're not talking about moving, 2 feet. Okay. We're talking about slight inches. Okay. If you can't train to do that, I mean, my goodness, ballroom dancers put out a hell of a lot more energy than that. Okay. So we're talking just slight movements here. It's really it needs to be part of your conditioning. Many people, I believe, condition improperly. They're conditioning for a different kind of outcome here. So yeah, head movement, angles, footwork. You got to condition. You got to get in shape to do that stuff, and it's not hard. It's not killing. I mean, you can really do it. Excuse me. This is the thing that I harp on. Like if you watch my foundations of the footwork video or foundations of the jab's got Vince, one of my guys who was never a boxer. Okay. Vince was a white collar guy, right? And I got him to do his head movement pretty good, for a guy who just was a hobbyist. And when some of the pro fighters would come to the gym, they had a hard time with Vince on the feet. Vince did not do any grappling because, Vince's head movement was, awkward. They weren't used to guys moving like that. So, and yeah, it's just a matter of simple conditioning. This is not, I mean, you talk about benching 300 or 400 pounds, that takes years. Getting in shape to do head movement is a matter of weeks. It shouldn't take you long. But it's learning when to do the head movement, when to, like if I'm way out of striking range, I'm not going to do it. Okay. I'm just going to, maybe do a little jukes with my shoulders here so you don't know exactly which way I'm coming. But when I'm in striking range, I want to be moving. Okay. Up, down, sideways, this and that, but not so drastic that my angles are poor. Now, on that video we saw yesterday, that instructional video, I saw a couple times where the guy's angle was poor. Okay. Like he was bent like this after his head movement. And that, I mean, unless you're going to do something funky, that's not what you want. You want to be in a good position to counter, because it's all about that. It's about creating an opening or capitalizing on an opening. That's what that head movement's all about. So I'm not going to get hit with a solid punch, or maybe I'm not going to get hit at all, but I'm able to counter you. So it's more than just not getting hit. It's not getting hit and countering, capitalizing on that opening that you have created by launching a strike. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, certainly. Touching on one other counter you mentioned, which is catching a punch, and just kind of from my background, that's always been tossed out there as a possibility. It takes a certain amount of timing and just ability to do that. And I guess one thing that I found is, when training in boxing and kickboxing, is feeding pads is one way that I always thought that after doing that after a while, and the way some of the classes or gyms I was involved with, there was a lot of partner work with pad holding and things like that. And eventually it gets to the point where, you're comfortable, boom, 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 hitting that. That was my experience in improving that. If there's other methods, or you think there are other ways that people can develop that skill, because ultimately you've got something coming at you, and you're also trying to intercept that, in a defensive way. And that's not always the easiest thing, especially if it's a legit punch someone's throwing.
Yeah, if it works for you, fine. Russell Stutley, who was on here, is not an advocate of the pads that way. I guess in a way I'm not either. I mean, I think what it is you just have to bear in mind that think like a baseball. You got 100-mile-an-hour pitch coming at you, and you catch that. This is kind of like the same thing. It's catch or parry, whichever. Okay, however you want to look at it, but it shouldn't be that hard. One of the problems with the pads, you're reaching for it. You don't want to reach with this with when you're catching a punch. You never want to extend yourself, because that makes you even more vulnerable. You want to that catch has to be here on you. You got to wait for that punch to come, not reaching for it. So let me just say that in your pad training, if you're reaching, I'm not saying don't do that. That's a different skill set you're developing there. So yeah, don't reach. You always want to try to keep, if you're in your turtle shell, in a boxing context, or any upper body strike, even if it's a street fight, that's where you're generally the safest. Okay. Now, anytime you start doing anything that breaks that shell, you're putting yourself in some sort of jeopardy, right? It's just common sense. You want to limit that jeopardy. All right. So the more you reach, and especially if you're reaching purely defensively, meaning if I'm trying to catch that punch, let's say with my lead hand, I'm not hitting you now. Okay. I'm just stopping your blow, but I'm opening myself up. That's not good. If I'm going to extend myself, it's going to be offensively with a strike. So I do have a chance of ending the fight, or the punch might set up something else. So when catching punches, it should generally be with your rear hand, so you have that lead hand to do things with. And it's weird. I admit it takes some work. People get scared because they're thinking they might get hit, and well, you've got to overcome that. It's reflexive. You got to work on it. Some guys are going to be better at it than others. Some guys are going to be super fast with your reflexes. Others are maybe a little bit, slow with it. And of course, there's other things you have to watch out for, that, you do it the right way, so you're not smacking yourself in the head, or in the face with the punch when you're blocking it. But these are all details that can be worked out in the gym. And now you add that with your footwork. Okay, so now you're catching a punch and you're gaining an angle with your footwork. And now you're seeing parts of his body that are wide open. It's hard to see wide open when you're standing in front of the guy. Okay. That's why angles are the key here. And the angles should be in an arc. You know, if you're going straight in and straight out, you're not getting really much of an angle. You're staying on that plane. It's the arc. It's like a clock. You know, you want to get around the horn here so you can really capitalize on this guy. And that comes with footwork, right? Proper footwork.
So we were talking, you know, kind of strictly in a boxing sense because that was a boxing fight, but are there non-boxing counters you also like? Like one that comes to mind for me that I learned from Muay Thai with the right hand is you are catching it with your lead hand, but you're kind of leaning back and throwing a knee. So I don't know if you can picture that, but you're kind of fading back, and it's you know, it's using the mechanics of a knee where you'd lean back and thrust your hips forward, but you're coming right under to the, you know, right into either their midsection or groin in a kind of a self-defense. You know, are there other ones that you like?
Yeah, we could go on all day with that. Sure, you could do a foot jab. You could do a leg kick. Uh, you know, you could if you want to go that far, you could duck under completely and try to shoot in on the guy. If you're again, if you have that momentum going, that footwork. Um, and remember, if you're already in motion, that's a good thing, right? As a defensive fighter. If I'm flat-footed, if I'm caught frozen, now I got to start that engine up, and you know, meaning I got to get my footwork going, and that slows you down. So yeah, we could talk about this, you know, ad infinitum. There's so many variables, you know, but it depends again. What's the size difference? How are my legs? You know, am I if I'm 6'6", yeah, I can use my legs to keep the guy away from me. You know, or maybe he opened up his groin, or maybe he flared his legs out, and I could shoot in, you know, with a kick and try to take out his support leg, you know, at the knee. You know, yeah, there's so many things that you can do. It's just you know, it's the context is everything. But there's one universal thing here, and that is you can't get hit with that punch. That's the key. So all this talking that we do about flipping this, that, whatever, it's all null and void if you get clobbered with that punch. So that's number one. I don't care if it's Muay Thai. I don't care if it's, you know, anything, you know, tie your shoes. It just don't get hit with that punch. And I think that's what needs to be worked on with people. Uh, you know, learning to move better, learning to not be so like, I guess, stiff. So many guys I see when I watch these clips, and now I'm not talking about yesterday even, but just fights. They're stiff, okay, and they tend to move in and out, in and out, and there's not a lot of, you know, of that looking to gain an angle kind of thing, and really that's what you want. You know, you want the opponent in front of you, but you don't want to be in front of your opponent. That is the secret to fighting. Your opponent is in front of you, but you're not in front of your opponent. And that's not a play on words. That's a physical possibility. And that's what you should shoot for. It's hard to describe it, but your tools are he's in front of you where you can use your tools. You are not in front of him where he can use his tools. That's what you shoot for. That's the goal in fighting. You get there, most of the battle's done. It's just a matter of pick your poison. What are you gonna attack them with?
This fight was interesting because it was a lot of, I think there's a part of that, like I said, curiosity element that, you know, people do it now, even with who would win between Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali, or even in comic books with like, who would win between like Superman and Thanos. I mean, people that are completely different publication. You know, Joe's with me on this stuff. It really taps into this idea of like who would win with an Olympic level wrestler who is an MMA guy and a pretty athletic, you know, YouTube guy who's been training boxing. Like it taps into this idea of like, I don't like to use the term spectacle, but it's something that's beyond just a standard matchup in a physical athletic context. There's more of a broader appeal, I think, that people can be interested in.
You know, it's funny you should mention the Superman Thanos matchup because I did see a classic matchup this weekend actually back in the theater. I saw Kong versus Godzilla, and you know, you're thinking, yeah, that there's no contest there, right? I mean, you've got fire breath, atomic breath. Kong's got nothing in that range, right? We're talking even different weight classes, honestly, if you're going traditionally. But again, Kong used a lot of footwork. He was circling, trying to stay
Hey, no
outside.
spoilers, Joe. No spoilers. I'm still
I'm
catching up.
not saying how it ended, but I'm just saying, you know, what you think is a big mismatch, you know, the same principles applied. Whether you're, you know, a guy defending yourself on the street or a 300-foot gorilla, you still got to, you know, make sure basically the giant lizard isn't directly, you're not in front of him with his atomic breath. So I was happy to see that.
Well, I'm still catching up. I just started Skull Island. Coincidentally, you mentioned that, so I'm looking forward to. Although I will say, Joe, you know, will is it worth me going to the theater to see that? Because I got HBO Max, so I
Depends how
can.
good your TV is. I mean, it's definitely not like an art house theater where you want kind of, you know, you can get the most of it. It is a um, you know, it is definitely mindless. Um, so I mean, it is spectacle. So depending what your, you know, your comfortability with COVID. Like we had our assigned seats. There was no one near us. We've got this great theater here, the Tivoli, this old school theater. So I always try and support it. But I would say, yeah, I mean, it's just there to watch. You know, it's you know it's monster porn. So you want to watch, you know, as on the biggest screen as possible, in my opinion. But if you've got a kick-ass like 4K TV, you know, it's also worth the stream. So I saw it in the theater, and then I came back and just, you know, went to the money shot, so to speak. At home, I went fast forwarded through all the character development, as you will. But yeah, it's definitely not. You mentioned Skull Island. I actually, uh, of the whole, you know, MonsterVerse franchise, I still think that might be the best one. I think that was actually quite good. I dig it though, the whole vibe. Have you seen the whole thing or?
No, I got halfway through, so I mean the setting's cool. Obviously, Vietnam era, and
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, the soundtrack, you know, the 70s rock soundtrack and the, you know, the Hueys and everything. That just it had me right at the gate. It's like, okay, this is what if I'm going to watch something mindless, it's checking all the boxes for me. So it was a lot
well,
of fun.
so I mean, you touched on that. Godzilla versus King Kong was, you know, obviously this is a remake to the 1960s version, which was essentially USA v Japan. You know, and I'm just curious. You know, we talk more about like the fights and how there's always when there's cultural matches up, so to speak. Even the case with like Paul versus Askren, like Jake Paul is basically famous for being, you know, pushing out content on YouTube and being, I don't want to say being himself, but just having this personality online. Askren's is older, I think, in mid to late 30s at this point. So basically kind of an older generation, at least in the, you know, the entertainment concept, famous for being a wrestler and MMA guy. And, you know, and it's like, that's the matchup, right? This is the background, and it's two things they're representing. You know, Rocky Four, obviously, right? You know, even Drago, and then, you know, USA with Stallone and Rocky. And so I guess what I mean is Hackenschmidt Gotch, right? Going back in the day, the Russian Bear. This is all like there's a lot more to the entertainment or interest in a competition, a fight, than just two guys going at it. It's what do these people represent, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of it's always been traditionally like hype, you know, like even in pro wrestling back in, you know, at the turn of the 19th, you know, 20th century, you know, uh Japanese armbar, or you know, they had all that, you know, these terms and everything. This wasn't a Japanese armbar. Everybody knew this armbar, but it was making it exotic. Okay, oh, this is from a foreign land. You know, when the Japanese jiu-jitsu or judokas would work out, you know, or not work out, but just have a wrestling match against the American, or the American against the Australian, or you know, yeah, it was always that kind of hype. Yeah, you know, and you know, even on a lesser degree in boxing back in America, you would have the Italian kid against the Irish kid, or the Italian kid against the Jewish kid, or this or that, whatever it was. It would break down to that. Yeah, and people would like, because everyone has their own sense of pride, you know, be it in your nationality or your your hometown, and people feed off of that. Promoters, that's their job. Promoters are there to promote, to build this up, to make it, you know, felt like we were talking about yesterday. Sometimes it's not the talent, it's the song in the music industry. This could be it too. It's let's create this hype. And many times the events live up to the hype, and many times the events don't live up to the hype. It's an interesting thing. It's there's just so much promotion behind it. It's all about making money.
To catch us up, when you say the talent, not the song, what do you mean? Or the song, not the talent, what do you mean?
So, like I've said this before, my dad played music with a guy named Steve Popovich. They all started in Pennsylvania, moved to Cleveland. Steve ended up making it very big in the music industry. I believe he started in Mercury Records or something, and ended up with his own publishing company. And he had guys like Barbra Streisand, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Meatloaf, you name it. And he told me, because I used to hang out with him in Cleveland, he's like, because I was playing big time drums back then, and about recording, and he's like, it's not the talent, it's the song that makes you the star. There's plenty of examples of that. You'll get good talent will get respected by other musicians, but what sells, and it's that song, it's that hit song. And many times back then it was studio musicians that were playing the tracks, it wasn't even the artists, but it's the song. So it's the same kind of philosophy here. You have to have that song, that meaning that event, that and sometimes the talent becomes secondary to that, and nowadays in the music industry with auto tune, and back then even they could do tricks in the studio that would enhance the singer or the band. So yeah, I see a lot of that, and it's just, the hype, like you said, there was, I guess these two gentlemen somehow developed a thing, and it mushroomed, and they both made a lot of money off of this event. So, I'm sure there's a lot of boxers out there, that have paid their dues, and they're like, man, we'll never see $1 million ever. That's the heartache of it, for the purists, where you have talented boxers, let's say, that have spent years, and they never get the payday.
Well, yeah, if you're doing it for the money, and I think we talked pretty recently about this on the podcast, how the UFC was going to go broke back in the late 90s. They had to make you interested in the story. If there's no story around it, if it's just two guys, I mean, unless you're, an insider or someone who cares about the sport, the nuance of the sport, but that's not a vast audience. To really cash in, you've got to get the casual fan to pick a side, to have some kind of vested interest. I mean, any of the sports, you look at, baseball, what have you, it's completely an artificial construct, right? It's like, oh, this team now represents Cleveland. Well, none of those guys are from Cleveland, probably, or very few of them are, but we'll just say, hey, we'll give them the shirt from Cleveland, and now you pretend they're the Cleveland team. And it gives you a reason to care, and it's fun, it's fun to have unscripted drama like that. But yeah, totally. I mean, it's, although it's interesting you say it's the song, not the singer, because I've literally heard it the reverse, that it's the singer, not the song. And it's interesting vibe, because there's versions of songs, like I've heard people cover versions, and there's usually, to me, a definitive version of a song. So, whether, artist A does it, I like it. Artist B, no, I could take it or leave it,
Well, I'm going to stick with what Steve Popovich says. That was his line of work. He didn't say the singer. He said it's the song, not the talent. You could be the most talented musician. If you don't have that song, it's going nowhere. Now, what you're talking about is subtleties, arrangements. Yeah, different. Yeah, that of course plays into it. But if it's a shitty song, you're not going to like it no matter what.
So yeah, absolutely. I'm saying you have it has to be a good song. And I think to your point of like, there are musicians who can play circles around popular musicians, or they always make fun of the Beatles, right? Is that they're not, or like Ringo Starr, right? They say he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles, but um, it's because they made pop songs that people liked. It didn't matter that they were not the best musicians. Um, there's a lot of arguments I've heard. I can't think of that producer's name, but yeah, I mean, a lot of high level musicians would disparage him, but yeah, but people want to listen to it. It's got hooks, so yeah, I think we are maybe talking about two different aspects of the music thing. So yeah, you
Well,
could be, go ahead.
I'll jump in something. So with regard to who's the talent, not the song, I mean, the who is maybe the considered the better musician isn't always the one that has the more popular rendition. I mean, is it Yellow Taxi, Big Yellow Taxi? The most popular version is the Counting Crows Vanessa Carlton version, not the Joni Mitchell one, who obviously was the first recording artist on it. So is Joni Mitchell a lesser musician or a lesser talent than Vanessa Carlton? I'll let you draw your own conclusion there. So I think I can side with us, the gentleman that Tony's saying, just from a commercial standpoint. Joe, I appreciate your perspective, because you're a musician and you can really appreciate the intrinsic value or someone's abilities, in that space. But yeah, from the commercial appeal, there's a lot more to it, I'd say.
Well, let's say this. My band has covered a lot of popular songs, and we have definitely not taken them to they have not, the song has not carried our band anywhere. So
stick with one song and nail it, and maybe you're going too broad.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, cover songs. I mean, like, the biggest thing that I could think of is "I Will Always Love You," the Dolly Parton song, which was a hit for Dolly Parton. She wrote that song. It was a hit. And then Whitney Houston came out with it, and it was like the world's most popular song there for a while. Okay. It was like way over the top. So I think what you have to look at is you can't have a Schlockmeister as a drummer or a keyboardist. I mean, you have to have some level, but you just can't walk in there and say, "I'm the world's greatest piano player," because there's some monster like Oscar Peterson in the jazz world. But Oscar Peterson's never, that genre didn't, he went nowhere with it financially compared to, I don't know, somebody else in another vein, But be that as it may, getting back to the tying it in, that sometimes it's the promotion that sells. Whitney Houston, when she did the Star Spangled Banner, okay, that was released as a single. Of course, it was during the war, and performed at the Super Bowl, and it was an amazing rendition, okay, of a song that we've heard thousands of times in our lifetime. So there was somebody who took it, did the arranging. She didn't do the arranging; she did the vocals. But I mean, it was at the right time. America needed that pride in our country, okay, and boom.
I think a lot of it is, there's some different generational, depending your time period, like Big Yellow Taxi, Joni Mitchell, that was, I think early 70s. And then 30 years later, we obviously had the version that got even more popular, right? But there's been even contemporary covers. Wagon Wheel by Darius Rucker is the more popular version than the Old Crow Medicine, whatever the country western country band that did it like 4 or 5 years prior. That's within like the same era, but maybe people like Darius Rucker's version better. I'm just, there's a lot to it. I'm just saying there's no real great answer. There's just so many factors I feel that would.
Well, I think both observations can be true. It's not an either or thing. I think clearly you have to have a good song or all bets are off. If you have a garbage song, it doesn't matter. You could be whoever, you could be Jimi Hendrix and no one will want to listen to it if it's, if it's a really bad song. But if you have a good song and an artist who can interpret it well, that's the lightning in a bottle. It's, you're adding multiple dimensions to why you can get a hit, and context matters. Like Tony says, when does a song hit? Sometimes songs aren't discovered until much later, little hidden gems that were recorded, but for whatever reason. So I think, yeah, both things are both true. And ultimately, yeah, it is an artistic thing. So there is some subjective, it's not like a 300-pound bench press where it's like, well, we can measure this, it's like what makes a hit thing. Well, that's, what's going on in the popular conscious or, how is it marketed? Yeah. So I think both things can be true. And obviously, I think sometimes both things, all those principles have to kind of apply to really get something where you knock it out of the park.
So do you ever watch The Voice on NBC?
No, not at all.
I don't know what, it's an interesting thing because it's obviously, the premise of the show, don't you? It's
Is it just like a
essentially,
singing competition or?
well, yeah, but it's a singing competition, but the judges who are themselves, famous recording artists, cannot see the actual. It's supposed to be a blind audition. Essentially, they
Mm.
cannot see the person singing. So the person gets X amount of times, and then they press a button or pull a lever, and they can pull their chair, turn their chair around, which says I vote for this person to proceed, and then should be on my team. And sometimes they fight it out, but yeah, I mean, they're not, none of these none of these contestants are doing their own material. It's always covers. And in some cases, which is very ballsy, is they're doing covers of one of the songs of the actual judges. And in some cases, the people obviously get through because they put their own interpretation, or they put their own spin on it, so to speak, or in a manner that's interesting enough and shows enough talent for that particular recording artist, that musician, to accept them.
It's all about, no matter what it is, I guess it's just about making people enjoy, and no one's going to enjoy everything universally across the board. But if you can get enough people and it's promoted right, and reaches the people, like back in the old days, it was the DJs, the disc jockeys. That's why they had scandals with payola and stuff. Play my records, play this guy's records, it would get airplay, promote it, more people hear it. They're kind of, I think a lot of people still get influenced by whoever the DJ was or whoever the presenter is, no matter what the subject. And oh, okay, wow, they're playing this all the time. Must be great. It's kind of subliminal. It's like psychological play here. So yeah, a lot of it is just promotion, and I think getting back to what I mentioned, the promoters earlier in today's podcast. If things are promoted, you that I mean that's just the whole thing. You got to get it out, uh, because believe me, if two guys genuinely disliked each other let's say in a fighting context, they'd meet up at somewhere privately and settle their score, right?
Tony, that was was it Any Which Way You Can or Any Which Way But Lose? That was the premise of the ending climax. Remember that? Clint Eastwood. Do you remember that story? He was a boxer and he's set to fight a guy, but for some reason they start the fight early, basically. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I know the movies, but I never
Yeah.
actually saw them.
That was
So
pretty much it. I don't remember what spurred it, but they were supposed to fight, in this official matchup, and they went early, man. They kicked it off. And the whole town caught on and started following them around, basically, as they're scrapping.
yeah, well, yeah. See, but so yeah, so everybody has to. They should always bear that in mind, that this is an event. This is a happening, man. This, no matter what it is, it's just like Ali was so great at promoting. He'd say things to stir up the crowd, right, to get the interest. And many times it was derogatory comments towards his opponent, and it lingered, like with Joe Frazier especially, and just on and on, just to and yeah, there's a shtick to it.
So
And yeah, what were you going to say something? Oh,
I don't know. Maybe we lost Brian. Are you there?
yeah, I think we may have lost Brian moment. Well, but anyhow, yeah, hey, these guys made money on this fight yesterday, so good for them. I mean, that's what happens. Not everybody can get there. Like I said, there's guys who box for years and years with and will never touch that kind of bread. Um, so hey, what can you say? It's the way it is. It's Not disparaging to the two fighters yesterday, but let's, neither one of those guys are world champion boxers, or at that level, honestly, so, but they made a doggone good payday. Of course, now the champion boxers are making, hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars, but still, it's all relative, I guess. But boy, $1 million, I don't care. To me, that's a lot of money still.
One of my big MMA guys that I always liked was George St. Pierre. And if you recall some of his fights, the ones where the opponents got a little bit too rough with the trash talking are guys that he pretty much destroyed their careers. Matt Hughes was, portrayed himself, in a manner that obviously George didn't like. He came off as basically just a jock bully. And Matt Hughes went from being the most dominant welterweight in history to barely relevant, not even having a 500 record, after that. And Josh Koscheck, same thing, just shattered his orbitable, and he was never the same. I always thought that was really interesting, an approach. If you're going to take it to here, well, I'm going to take it to here.
Well, he had the goods to back it up, so you got to give hats off to these genuine great athletes. I mean, what can you say? And I guess in all walks of life, all sports, there's those guys that can step it up. They have, like in pool, we say you got another gear. Okay, these guys have another gear, but it's a team. Don't forget too, you have coaches, you have trainers, you have this and that, you have analysts that are like going over everything, and they know everything about your opponent. Like the biggest, like back in the days when Joe Louis was dominating, and Max Schmeling saw films and saw the opening, saw weakness, and he trained specifically for Joe Louis's weakness, and he capitalized on it, and he beat Joe Louis. And then, that was devastating. But the thing about Joe Louis is he came back from that, and he demolished. I mean, he really, really, really demolished Max Schmeling. Just, basically beat him to a pulp in their rematch. So, yeah, you just, some guys get habits, they have the wits about them. They have the brain, the smarts, to, look at the guy's vulnerabilities. And yeah, that's what you want to try to do, capitalize on it.
And Tony, you've always emphasized that goes for all fighting, is even if, grappling, for example, is somebody who's skilled, even if there's somebody who's, quote, evenly matched with them, if that person makes a mistake, they should be able to capitalize on. Like, it should just be over, especially when you've got that opportunity to submit, in that, in that context. So I always found that interesting, is like, because that's not always the case. And, hats off to anybody who's out there competing and training. But yeah, there's definitely an opportunity, I'd say, or people that can do those types of things.
It's always, everyone makes, unless the fight's over within seconds, like a flash knockdown or knockout, I should say. Both fighters can be making mistakes, okay, and some can be obvious, like in that let's say a flash knockout, the guy may have dropped his hands, let's say, and he gets clobbered. It's an obvious mistake. However, let's say he drops his hands and the other guy doesn't throw the punch, and the fight continues on a little bit. They both made mistakes, okay? The guy dropping his hands made a mistake, and the guy not capitalizing on it makes a mistake. And a lot of times analysts don't go that deep, because they really don't. They're not scientists about the fight. They don't care. Their job is probably a commentator, or if they are an analyst, they may not have the technical depth of knowledge to break it down even further. But everyone in a fight, again, unless it's over instantly, there are chances to capitalize on. That's anybody. That's anybody who's ever lived. None of us are perfect. In just the human structure, the way we are, every time I go to do something, I become vulnerable in another way, and vice versa. You just have to understand it. I don't mean you personally, but you have to understand that every human being, once they open up, is vulnerable, and you have to have the wits about you, the calmness and the vision, both physically and intellectually, to see these vulnerabilities and capitalize on them. And that doesn't happen all the time. So I look at things in a different way maybe than most people. So I don't really get to enjoy like the fights, okay? Because I'm too analytical about it. Years ago when I was playing music a lot, more than one girl said, "You know what? We're never going out again to listen to a live band because you ruin it for me." Because I'd sit there and say, "Oh, the drummer, he
Tony,
didn't do this
usually
right."
you're ruining it for other reasons with the girl. Come on.
I know, all right. Well, I had to develop a better repertoire. Now I can ruin it just by saying hello. But back then it was like, did he want to go out to hear music? Because I was too critical. Oh, the keyboard player, those aren't good chords, or they should have done this or that. So I was like a killjoy, and that's how it is. You know how it is when I watch fights. I'm sitting there screaming because it's like, man, this guy made this mistake, or he didn't do this right, he didn't do that right. I can't sit back and watch it and enjoy it, for the entertainment, because I don't look, I should look at it as entertainment. I don't. Okay. I look at it as let's say at a high level, to, athletes that are getting paid an extraordinary sum. They should be damn near perfect. Okay. Like if I'm going in for, let's say, major frigging surgery, I want that surgeon and his team to be basically perfect, right? I don't want them to be like making mistakes along the way. Oops, I'm sorry, we missed this bleeder over here. Oh, shoot. I don't want that. Right? They got to catch all these things. So that's how I look at it when I see sporting events. And it's not limited to fighting. It's any sporting event that I know. Now, you put me out there to watch an event on something like that I don't know that well, like, soccer. I don't follow soccer that well. I only watch it in the World Cup. I can enjoy it because I don't know what they're supposed to really be doing. I don't know what the world's greatest soccer player would have done in that position, right? So I can enjoy that. Um, but yeah, when it used to come music now, I don't get critical. I can go out and listen to a band and like not really, I don't care as much anymore. But with the fighting, yeah, I'm still like that because that's my life. That's my calling, I guess. So I get really, really critical. And I don't mean anything personal to the fighters or their team. I just say, oh man, shoot, this is what he should have done. Should have been more movement, or he missed the chance to get into the toe hold, or he should have went for this, fake the top wrist lock, and gone into a heel hook, or whatever.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think the first time we met at a camp back in the 90s was the UFC had been around at least, 4 or 5 years at that point. And I remember you mentioning that as one way to develop submissions and understanding is watch the UFC and pause it, go back, look at a scenario, look at a situation. What could you have done differently with regard to finishing somebody via submission that way? And so that always stuck with me. I'm not saying that I use it a whole lot, but it's definitely something that I always found really, really fascinating as an approach to analysis. And I'm sure there are others out there that do it, but you were definitely the first person to ever say that out loud.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a tool that everybody has at their disposal now. That in my day we didn't have that. I mean, even boxing. This is like before even VHS, recorders. You had to have 16 millimeter film or whatever, right? And then even with the VHS, it's kind of difficult. You'd have to buy the fights. It would be expensive. Now you don't. You can go on YouTube or wherever, but it's thinking outside of the box and actually never being satisfied with yourself. Okay. And that's the biggest thing, the self assessment. So many people can't take criticism. They turn on you, they'll start trashing you. That's why I won't give my opinion to anybody personally anymore. I haven't for years. Because when you try to give them one piece of constructive criticism, they turn on you, they start shit talking and trash talking you. They can't take it. So if they can't take it from a guy that they're coming to for advice, they're not going to be able to critically analyze themselves. They'll be just proud of what they do. Okay. you should be enthused by what you do, but not necessarily proud, because that pride will destroy you. Like, I never thought that I always thought I could have been better at everything I've ever done. I could have been better. And with the exception of some health things that popped up, I'm the reason I didn't get better. I'm the reason that I, could have been even a better drummer. Okay. I just didn't put, I was like, okay, I'm at this level. This is good enough for now. And I never got around to increasing it. Same with everything in my life. And that's how most people are, unless, like I said, when I had that aneurysm, that pretty much put the kibosh on everything. But besides that, if that never happened, I probably still wouldn't have been as good as I could have been.
Well, I think an important element to that, Tony, is not just settling or saying I'm good enough now, but it's also expecting more from professional athletes that you can watch. I mean, progressing, and there are people that are doing it now, and that's how it's advancing, in respective arts, but not settling for what other people are doing, in the ring or the cage or the mat, and saying what else can be done,
Right.
looking to push it further.
Well, right. And in this case, there's techniques like a lot of the stuff that I show that's just never been done. They don't train it. They don't know it. They're not really, and I'm sure that in certain arts that they do, let's say jujitsu, if you're a jujitsu guy, I'm sure there's jujitsu coaches out there that are doing some advanced stuff in the jujitsu world that could be incorporated, but these fighters or whatever don't know it. All right, aren't exposed to it, or whatever the case may be. So that's where it can get kind of frustrating. But the biggest frustrating thing is like when people just make glaring fundamental mistakes, and that's what really ticks me off. I don't get mad if somebody can't do something that they don't know exists. That's just, you can't get mad at the guy. All you can hope for is that they get exposed to it. But when they mess up on absolute fundamental things that everybody should know, that's, that gets under my skin. That there's just no excuse for that, because it's common knowledge in the fight game, let's say, like the right way to throw a jab or a cross or whatever. And if the guy can't do that properly, there's just no excuse for that. And I'm not putting that on anybody in particular. I'm just saying, I'm making up a scenario,
Well, yeah, and I think kind of like, I think as people who are, self-defense interested or martial artists or whatever, however you want to label it, we look at these things differently. It's not entertainment. We're looking at it to be educated, or to appreciate it at a different level. Like you said, like a musician listens to music differently than a non-musician. And I think that's kind of the trade-off, but you're definitely approaching it in a different way. And so you're expecting a certain level of ability, and it's hard to, and I think in the case of like music, yeah, there's no harm lost if you turn that off or flip that switch off. But, I think, watching the fight game, we should always be looking at it, critically and analytically.
Well, one thing to bear in mind is, as of this video, this year, I will have been doing catch wrestling for 44 years, 44 years of my life, legitimate shit. So I'm probably doing it longer than anybody on earth, right? So I have a vested interest in this that goes deeper than most people. And that's not to say 20 years isn't long. Yeah, there's people who've been doing their thing for 20 years, but I've been doing it for 44 years of self-defense oriented, high level, life or death kind of stuff. So I really, 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 really take this stuff seriously. Okay. And so I'm coming from a unique angle here. That's the deal. I'm just, it's a different thing for me, and I don't expect others to have my kind of enthusiasm or my kind of time and service, so to speak. But yeah, when I just see things that I think are shoddy or just and then you're getting paid all this money for this, that I just don't get it. And then when it comes to the street, any kind of street encounter, the price that yet you may pay, as opposed to getting paid, the price that you may pay will be more than any dollar amount any athlete ever made. Because if you screw up, you lose your life. That's the highest payment you can make is sacrificing or losing your life. And I just don't see people taking it seriously enough. And watching some of those YouTube clips of these quote unquote street scenarios, these people still don't look at it seriously enough. It's life or death here. I don't think they really get that. They're still approaching it as a sport. From the videos that I've seen, they're still approaching it with the mentality of sport, as opposed to, you cannot make a mistake. It cannot happen. You've got to be a blur. You've got to take this guy out or you will die. That's the approach in the self-defense scenario. And I don't want to see anybody hurt. I don't want to see anybody lose their life. So for me, you can't be making these fundamental mistakes, and you can't be trying these fancy moves that can expose you even more.
Well, yeah, I think when you mentioned like comparing it, the analogy to a surgeon, you know, um, it's that serious, or like an EMT worker or whatever, when it's life, because that's what these skills ultimately, I mean, if that's what we're looking at it to, which I think most of the guys who are following you and trying to train under you, that's the priority. This is life-saving techniques, this is not something to be taken as entertainment, um, or if you're doing it, just, it depends on the context, but when you're watching a live fight, you're wanting to apply that standard of excellence to it, that you can't be coming in there, like you said, not knowing the fundamentals. That's just unforgivable, because that's life or death stuff that we're trying to learn here and develop. Ultimately, that's the bottom line. It's not just a sport. It's not just entertainment, and that gets lost so often. Sometimes it's just subtly over time that shifts away. But I think that you have to be, I think trainers and coaches have to kind of constantly remind their team or their students that's what this is there for, and that's why you have to take it seriously. And maybe that's why I think it's more understandable to be frustrated when people are going out there and not preparing properly, or making sloppy mistakes.
And even in a competition basis, or like non-street, we're talking about what's going on and what we're seeing. I mean, we're in the information age, and things are progressing, things are evolving, and we want them to. Obviously, that's why we're all enthusiasts about this. We want everything to improve and evolve, and us also, in individuals in particular. And so I guess the comparison I can make, Tony, is if someone is a researcher, a scientist, at a high level in a laboratory, and they have peers, or they're working off, they're being exposed to people who are doing things fundamentally wrong that wouldn't pass a high school chemistry test. Are they advancing anything? And that's kind of where we are with, I don't want to say all, but definitely some of what's going on out there is, it's not being advanced, because these basics, these fundamentals are not being, they haven't even, those are being wrong. Therefore it's obviously, it's affecting the overall outcome and affecting the overall progression of everything.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And I remember saying this years ago when I still was on the internet with forums and stuff. Like, if you put two, just not champions now, but just two like MMA guys, and one guy gets knocked out, well, what do you think a world-class boxer, or a guy who's not even necessarily world-class, but that trains boxing, you're going to tell me that the boxer can't knock you out? And, it was all to try to like get these people to turn the light bulb on, to say, oh, he's making a point. But they don't do that. They're like, well, I'll just take a boxer down, or this, that. That's not the point. No, you may, or you may not take the boxer down. The point is, the fighter here got knocked out by a guy who's not considered a good striker. Therefore, you need to work on your striking defense. Don't like change the subject and say, I'll take you down, or I'll do this. Admit you have a weakness. Admit, okay, if this guy knocked me out, then pretty much any guy can knock me out. Okay. I mean, that's how you have to look at it. You have to humble yourself, right? And then really, really work on it. So now that guy, that MMA guy or whatever it is, that unskilled striker is not going to knock you out. That's the approach you have to take. Don't look for shortcuts. Don't look for gimmicks. Look to work on your deficiencies. Because I've always said this, guys that like cross train so much and never really master anything, they're just one move away from losing it all. Okay. And you don't want that. You want to have such a level that you're comfortable in ranges, grappling, striking, what have you, and your vulnerabilities are less. Okay, so it doesn't do you any good to gain 2 or 3 positives and have 5 or 6 more negatives because of that. So it's I've always said it, it's like learning a language but not really mastering it, just learning a few phrases, and you try to enter into a conversation, you're going to open up a can of worms because now you're delving into a world that you're not really fully aware of. And that's how it is with fighting. You may know a couple of submissions, let's say, but do you really want to start tangling with somebody if these submissions don't work? Now you're in a world that you may not be able to get out of again. The grappling element of it. You may get
Well,
your head pounded out.
yeah, the old adage, a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, I think strictly applies here.
Well, yeah. I mean, but again, to each his own. If this is what you're into, the sport and the entertainment and all of that, go for it. And there's a place for that. There's thousands of training gyms out there probably that can do that. But yeah, I just I was always a guy that was taught fundamentals first, and don't even think about going on to anything more on until you have those fundamentals and you've been green lighted. It's this is how I was raised. And in the music, I sometimes ventured away from that philosophy, and instead of practicing as much on my, let's say, with the jazz accordion with the scales and arpeggios or something, I'm going to play some tunes. I'm going to work on some nice chords and harmony. Yeah, okay, well, it affected my playing because I should have been spending the time working more on my technique as opposed to, doing something nice, or that I wanted and that's the thing. Sometimes we're not our own, we need guidance, all of us. But I know it. I know what I was doing. I was conscious of it. And I just made that choice to, and guess what? In a way, I let my teachers down because they had faith in me, they had belief in me, and I let them down. They did not let me down in the music world. I let them down. So but in the fighting world, no. And I think that's part of it because it was so strict, and it's so life or death, so important to me that I wanted to make music a little bit more fun, and not life or death, because it isn't life or death, or at least it wasn't. The music, I wasn't that bad where somebody wanted to blow my head off.
We're coming up on the 2-hour mark. Do you have any
Guys.
other closing thoughts? Any other?
No, it was nice to have Brian. I mean, we got to get Nico back too. Maybe we can all 4 be on. That would be cool. And no, it's all good. We covered a lot of topics, and I just hope that people understand where I'm coming from. It's just that I just want to see solid fundamentals and good. There's a lot of techniques out there that it can be worked on, and you can do some of this in the privacy of your own home. We filmed some stuff yesterday for the upcoming membership site, and maybe we'll release a few little clips on YouTube. But there's things that you can do that can help you. You can do all this without a gym.
Yeah, and the material we went over is so good for really anybody who wants to learn. It's not anyone specific who's trying to be an MMA fighter or catch wrestling expert. Well, most of it was boxing, but anybody who's interested in boxing or self-defense or just even athleticism overall, I think, and can be applied to a lot of different people. So Yeah, I'm glad I was able to make it down and stay tuned to the rest of you listening. And as far as closing thoughts, I'm thinking King Kong versus Godzilla. I'm thinking Kong by armbar is probably how it's going to go down. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, no spoilers. I'll let you know.
Well, I don't know, but I would think if it gets into King Kong being like a gorilla, I think he'll win by a banana split. That's what I would have to think. And stretch out Godzilla.
Yeah, we're monkeying around way too much now. So
Well, just don't go ape on me, okay? All right. Well, good to see you guys, and we'll see each other soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.